Hello and welcome to our panel discussion. We're discussing today Canada's anti-BDS vote, which took place in Parliament in February. Now, the NDP did not endorse it, and they did not endorse it on the grounds of what they say is free speech. We're here to discuss whether it's a valid reason or whether maybe there's some other reason tucked away in there. Our guests, George Woodward, Bob Mayton, and Marianne Walters. Thank you for joining me. The notion of free speech here makes me wonder. I mean, this first of all, and perhaps there are those, not the NDP, but those watching who may not realize this was not a binding, any legally binding anti-BDS vote one bit. This was proposed by the Conservatives, and the Liberals endorsed it. And it was made as a statement. This is not something we want to see supported. So it's more of a slap on the wrist, maybe, for those who are purporting BDS and letting people realize, as a government, this is not something that we support. But the NDP decided not to go along with it on the grounds of they say free speech. And I'd like to know from you whether you think it was a valid argument or not. I'm going to start with you on this one, George.
Well, first of all, it was Charlie Angus, and I know Charlie Angus. I really appreciate him, and he and I have worked together in the far north, and he's a great guy. I really like him. I think on this one, though, he might want to rethink this one. I don't see the two going together. I don't think that the whole idea of free speech and this whole dialogue that needs to go on regarding the boycott really go hand in hand. I don't see them as being compatible at all. So for me, it's just sort of a non-issue. I don't get where he's going with this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think it's nonsense. It just doesn't make sense at all. And in fact, I've read some things since by those who are pro-BDS that it has increased debate, and I think it will. The debate will continue, discussion, and that's good.
But you don't buy the free speech issue one bit?
Not at all,
okay.
No.
Yeah, no one is saying that you can't discuss BDS. To me, that's the free speech issue. The issue is whether BDS is anti-Semitic and whether it's an expression of hatred of Jews. And I believe that it actually is, because there is so much that can be said about the way that other countries are operating, especially in the Middle East, as compared to Israel. And to boycott and divest and sanction Israel for being a Western civilization with Western values, doing the best that it can in very difficult circumstances to defend itself and to protect itself and to uphold Jewish values, which I really admire and respect, and which they do very successfully. I think that has to be an expression of anti-Semitic behavior. So I don't think it's an issue of free speech at all.
I think it's even more than anti-Semitic. I mean, the whole effort is directed towards getting rid of Israel, abolishing Israel, even though the people that promote it have told people it's mainly to help out the Palestinians in Samaria and Judea and to make peace. That's not true at all.
Well, there's certain connections that just aren't being made. I mean, if you've gone to the BDS site, it does declare that it's the so-called peaceful version of the Palestinian resistance. And if you understand what the Palestinian resistance is about and who is behind it, this should raise some questions. Now, the NDP MP, maybe I don't have the French pronunciation right, it's Hélène Laverdière, she asked whether by adopting the motion, she'd be condemning the Ontario arm of the Canadian Union of Public Employees, CUPE, which endorses BDS. I thought that was a very interesting angle, because if you go to the CUPE site, you'll see that the site, a local site, features an anti-Israel propaganda article. It's entitled, "Raid on the Gaza Flotilla, Israel's Attack on Us All," unquote. This CUPE article actually asserts that Israel is on a collision course with international standards of decency, solidarity, and respect for human rights. In fact, Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East that respects human rights. So you ask yourself, first of all, how did the Canadian Union of Public Employees find themselves in this level of politics when many of their who they represent don't even go along with this stuff? And for the record, the CUPE site also states, quote, that CUPE is a founding partner of the NDP. Yes. We are proud to be New Democrats. So I don't buy this free speech thing at all. given the question of this
yes.
lady, given the
Had
whole
an
tie-in,
effect.
it's very suspect. It's just that I know that there are many Jewish groups that came down on them heavily, and this is a situation that we're facing political correctness, and hence they come out with the free speech issue.
Exactly. I think the NDP has a problem. They've moved much further to the left in the last couple of months with their convention out west. And I think that moving in the direction that they're going is separating themselves from the Canadian population, which is much more centrist than they're placing themselves. So I think that unless they move back again into the center, I think they've got a real problem. The other thing is that what they did to Tom Mulcair, I think, is really problematic too. They basically fired him and then asked him to come back for a couple of years and fill in while they found somebody else. And I think the values that are expressed in those kinds of behaviors are really problematic. And the BDS stance that they've taken is another example of that. It's another very problematic position.
Interesting that you mentioned Mulcair, because I've read reports where Mulcair seems to openly support Israel.
Yeah, I've read that.
Yes, yes. You were going to say, George.
Well, I think this whole discussion on boycotting, it's just a camouflage, because if they truly wanted to boycott the products from Israel, that is such a huge, wide list of products. None of us would have cell phones. None of us would. I mean, there's so many things that we would boycott and never put our hand to at all if we truly wanted to boycott. It really just is a way of describing again and coming again at this whole area of we are against the land of Israel, we're against the Jewish people inhabiting it, and this is the way we'll express it today. And it's a very, very unfortunate, very shallow way to look at it, in my opinion.
Even before it was condemned by our government, and now some states in the U.S. are doing the same thing, but putting a little more behind it, where there are actually consequences if you don't, if you're supporting that. But fortunately, the BDS has not had a great impact in Israel, and the student groups in Canada, universities that have supported it, they have never been able to get any university to support their recommendation. So,
well, Israel has also, or wherever this originated, there's a boycott campaign that encourages the buying of Israeli products.
Yes.
And today we have the internet, and more truth gets out there because you don't have this collusion that you sometimes may see in certain media, because the propaganda against Israel is thick. But the internet does offer other alternatives. People can read deeper, they can do their research, and which is something very positive. But as you said about the boycott and divestment drive, is not really sticking, and even IAW, we've seen that diminish a bit. It's still a delegitimization of the state of Israel, and it goes from the top on, the UN down, which is something that we really need to stick on.
yeah.
Any other final
And
thoughts
I agree
before we
with George.
close?
I think that the development of technologies in Israel is so advanced and
Yes.
such a contribution to the world with their development of holograms where they can simulate surgical procedures and development of drugs for cancer and various other things.
You'd have to give up your cell phone if you really want to.
That's true.
Try doing that.
Are we going to give those up? I don't think
Try
so.
doing that.
Please share this video, and on YouTube, click the button below to become a subscriber. In consideration of Canada's 150th birthday, please consider 150 ways to bless Israel through your Christian embassy, the ICEJ Canada. Consider becoming a $150 monthly donor. Plant 150 trees, 150 prayers for Israel. The opportunities are endless. Please contact us.